The air at 30,000 feet felt thick with tension, the kind that clings to your skin and makes your pulse quicken. A sleek private jet hummed through the night, its cabin dimly lit, the soft glow of overhead lights casting long shadows. 5 figures occupied the space, their silhouettes sharp against the polished interior. In the foreground, a man in a tailored suit leaned forward, his voice dripping with condescension, his finger jabbing the air as he berated a woman seated across from him. Her posture was calm, her face unreadable, but her eyes burned with quiet defiance. Behind them, 2 others, a flight attendant and a stunned colleague, watched, frozen, as the confrontation unfolded. The 5th figure, a pilot, stood at the cockpit door, his expression taut with unease. Scrawled across the armrest of the woman's seat, in bold, jagged letters, was a phrase that screamed for attention. Who's really in charge now? The scene was raw, electric, a clash of power and pride captured in a single, breathless moment, the jet a pressure cooker of human conflict hurtling through the sky. Amara Jackson adjusted her silk scarf, her fingers steady despite the venom spilling from the man across the aisle. The private jet, a perk of her new role, was supposed to be a quiet space to prepare for her first day as CEO of Horizon Innovations. Instead, it had become a battlefield. Richard Caldwell, the company's outgoing CEO, hadn't stopped talking since takeoff. His voice, sharp and self-assured, sliced through the cabin's hum. "You know, it's a shame how standards have slipped," he said, his eyes flicking toward her with a smirk. "Back in my day, we didn't just hand out titles to check boxes. You had to earn them." Amara's jaw tightened, but she didn't flinch. She'd heard worse. Growing up in a small Georgia town, she'd navigated enough sideways glances and whispered slurs to know how to hold her ground. But this was different. This was personal. Caldwell didn't know who she was, not yet. He didn't know the woman he was belittling was the one about to take his throne. The irony was almost poetic. She leaned back, her dark eyes locking onto his, and let him dig his own grave. "Tell me more, Mr. Caldwell," she said, her voice smooth as velvet but laced with steel. "What exactly do you mean by standards?" He scoffed, oblivious to the trap, and launched into a tirade about merit, legacy, and the way things used to be. Every word was a shovel, burying him deeper. Amara's lips curved slightly, not in amusement, but in anticipation. She'd been underestimated her whole life, by teachers who thought she'd never leave her hometown, by colleagues who dismissed her as diversity hire, by men like Caldwell who saw her skin before her strength. But she climbed anyway, from a scholarship kid at MIT to a tech prodigy who'd turned failing startups into empires. Now, at 38, she was here, on the cusp of leading one of America's most innovative companies. And Caldwell? He was about to learn how wrong he was. The flight attendant, a young woman named Lila, hovered nearby, her hands twisting nervously. She'd heard the rumors about Caldwell, his temper, his arrogance, but seeing it firsthand made her stomach churn. She glanced at Amara, catching the quiet power in her posture, and wondered who this woman was to withstand such a storm. The jet hit a pocket of turbulence, a jolt that mirrored the tension in the cabin. Caldwell didn't miss a beat. "I built Horizon from nothing," he said, his voice rising. "I know what it takes to lead. You don't just waltz in and what?" Amara cut in, her tone sharp enough to slice through his bluster. The cabin went silent. Even the hum of the engines seemed to fade. Caldwell blinked, caught off guard, but recovered quickly. "You'll see," he said, leaning back with a smug grin. "Leading isn't for everyone." Amara didn't respond. She didn't need to. The truth was coming. It would hit harder than any comeback. For now, she let him talk, let him think he was in control. The jet descended toward New York, the city's lights glinting like a promise below. Tomorrow, everything would change. The jet touched down at JFK just after midnight, the city's skyline a jagged crown against the horizon. Amara stepped onto the tarmac, her heels clicking with purpose, her briefcase a quiet reminder of the weight she carried. Caldwell brushed past her without a word, his arrogance trailing him like cologne. Lila, the flight attendant, offered Amara a small, apologetic smile before disappearing into the terminal. The colleague, a nervous man named Tom who'd been silent the entire flight, scurried after Caldwell, clutching his laptop like a shield. Amara didn't follow. She stood for a moment, breathing in the crisp night air, letting the sting of Caldwell's words settle into fuel. She'd spent years turning insults into motivation, and this was no different. By morning, she'd be in Horizon's boardroom, not as a guest, but as the one calling the shots. The thought sent a thrill through her veins. Back in the terminal, Caldwell was already on his phone, barking orders to someone on the other end. "I don't care what the board says," he snapped. "They'll regret this. They need me." Tom hovered nearby, his face pale, clearly uncomfortable but too loyal, or too scared, to speak up. Amara caught his eye as she passed, and for a split second, she saw something flicker in his expression. Doubt? Fear? Maybe both. She didn't dwell on it. She had bigger battles to fight. At the hotel, Amara's suite overlooked Central Park, the city's pulse thrumming below. She kicked off her shoes and opened her laptop, pulling up the company's financials. Horizon was a tech giant, but it was bleeding bad decisions, bloated budgets, and a culture of fear under Caldwell's reign. The board had chosen her to fix it, not because of her skin or her story, but because she'd done it before. She'd saved 3 companies in 5 years, each one a mess when she arrived, each one thriving when she left. But Horizon was different. It wasn't just a company, it was a legacy, and Caldwell's shadow loomed large. As she scanned the reports, her phone buzzed. A text from her mentor, Dr. Elaine Carter, the woman who'd pushed her to apply for the CEO role. "You ready for this, kid?" Amara smiled, typing back, "Born ready." Elaine had been her rock at MIT, the one who saw her potential when others saw only a girl from nowhere. Now, Elaine's faith was a reminder of why she was here. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for every kid who'd been told they didn't belong. Sleep came in fragments, her mind racing with strategies and scenarios. By dawn, she was up, dressed in a tailored Navy suit that felt like armor. The boardroom was waiting, and so was Caldwell. He'd been invited to the transition meeting, a courtesy he didn't deserve, but one the board insisted on. Amara didn't mind. She wanted him there. She wanted him to see. The twist came as she stepped into the elevator at Horizon's Manhattan headquarters. A young woman, barely 25, slipped in beside her, her badge marking her as an intern. "You're Amara Jackson, aren't you?" she asked, her voice trembling with awe. Amara nodded, surprised. "I read about you," the intern said, her eyes wide. "You're the reason I applied here. I didn't think people like us could make it this far." Amara's chest tightened. She saw herself in the girl's eyes, hungry, hopeful, afraid of being crushed. "We can," Amara said softly. "And we will." The elevator dinged, and the intern stepped out, her shoulders a little straighter. Amara stood alone, the weight of that moment sinking in. This wasn't just about her or Caldwell. It was about the people watching, the ones who'd come after her. She squared her shoulders and stepped into the fray. The boardroom was a cathedral of glass and steel, its long table flanked by men and women in suits, their faces a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Amara walked in, her presence commanding silence. Caldwell was already there, seated at the far end, his arms crossed, his smirk a challenge. The board chair, a silver-haired woman named Margaret Voss, stood to greet Amara. "Welcome, Ms. Jackson," she said, her voice warm but firm. "We're eager to see what you bring to Horizon." Caldwell snorted, loud enough to draw eyes. "Let's hope it's more than promises," he muttered. The room tensed, but Amara didn't react. She took her seat at the head of the table, her eyes scanning the faces around her. Some were allies, some were skeptics, and some, like Tom, who sat fidgeting beside Caldwell, were just trying to survive the storm. Margaret began the meeting, outlining the transition. Amara listened, her notes meticulous, her mind sharp. Then it was her turn. She stood, her voice steady as she laid out her vision: innovation, inclusivity, accountability. She didn't mention Caldwell, but every word was a rebuke to his legacy of fear and stagnation. The room leaned in, captivated. Even Tom's eyes widened, his pen pausing mid-scribble. Caldwell, though, was unmoved. He leaned forward, interrupting. "Pretty words," he said, his tone dripping with disdain. "But this isn't a TED Talk. Horizon needs a leader, not a dreamer." The air crackled. Margaret's lips tightened, but Amara raised a hand, calm as ever. "You're right, Mr. Caldwell," she said, her voice cutting through his bluster. "Horizon needs a leader, and that's why I'm here." The room held its breath. Caldwell's face reddened, but before he could respond, Amara turned to the board. "Let's talk numbers," she said, pulling up a projection. She dismantled Caldwell's last 5 years with surgical precision. Missed opportunities, bloated contracts, plummeting morale. The board listened, rapt, as she outlined her plan to turn it around. Caldwell's smirk faded, replaced by something darker. Doubt. The twist deepened when Tom, of all people, spoke up. "Ms. Jackson," he said, his voice shaky but clear, "I've seen your work at your last company. The numbers, they're real. I think you're what we need." The room froze. Caldwell's head snapped toward Tom, his eyes blazing with betrayal. Tom shrank slightly, but held his ground. Amara nodded, a flicker of gratitude in her eyes. The meeting ended with a vote of confidence in Amara's leadership. Caldwell stormed out, his footsteps echoing like a fading empire. But Amara knew this was only the beginning. He wouldn't go quietly. That night, she found an email waiting in her inbox. Anonymous, but the tone was unmistakable. "You don't belong here. Step down, or you'll regret it." Her heart raced, but she didn't flinch. She'd faced threats before, online, in boardrooms, in life. This was just another hurdle. She forwarded the email to security and went back to work. The city hummed outside her window, a reminder of the stakes. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for the intern in the elevator, for Tom, for every person who'd been told they weren't enough. And she wasn't backing down. The weeks that followed were a gauntlet. Amara dove into Horizon's operations, untangling years of mismanagement. She met with teams, listened to engineers, and sat with janitors, her door always open. The company buzzed with a new energy, but Caldwell's shadow lingered. Whispers followed her, rumors of sabotage, leaked emails questioning her competence. She knew who was behind it. Caldwell hadn't left the company. He'd taken a consulting role, a consolation prize from the board to ease his exit. But he wasn't consulting. He was scheming. Amara caught him in the halls, rallying old allies, planting seeds of doubt. "She's in over her head," she overheard him say to a group of executives. "Give her a month, she'll crash." She kept her cool, but inside, she was burning. The twist came during a late-night strategy session. Amara was reviewing a new product launch when her assistant, Priya, burst in, her face pale. "You need to see this," she said, handing Amara a tablet. It was an internal memo, leaked to the press, claiming Amara had falsified her credentials. The accusation was baseless, but the damage was real. Social media exploded, hashtags like Horizon Fraud trending. Amara's stomach dropped, but she didn't panic. She'd seen this playbook before: smear, discredit, destroy. She called an emergency meeting with her team, her voice calm, but commanding. "We don't hide," she said. "We fight with the truth." By morning, she'd released a statement, backed by her MIT records and a letter from Elaine Carter. The press pivoted, praising her transparency. But the victory was short-lived. Caldwell wasn't done. At the next board meeting, he walked in uninvited, a stack of papers in hand. "I have evidence," he declared, his voice booming. "Ms. Jackson's leadership is tanking our stock." He slid the papers across the table, charts showing a dip in share prices. The board murmured, uneasy. Amara stood, her eyes locked on Caldwell. "Those numbers are selective," she said, pulling up her own data. "Here's the full picture: growth in R&D, new contracts, employee retention up 20%. The stock dip is market noise, not my leadership." The room shifted, eyes turning to Caldwell. He faltered, his confidence cracking. Margaret Voss spoke up. "Richard, your time here is done." Let Miss Jackson do her job. Caldwell's face twisted, but he left without a word. Amara exhaled, her heart pounding. She'd won this round, but the war wasn't over. That night, alone in her office, she found a photo on her desk, a picture of her younger self, graduating MIT, her smile wide and fearless. A note was tucked beneath it, in Elaine's handwriting. "Keep going, kid." Amara smiled, the weight of the fight settling into resolve. She was ready for whatever came next. The confrontation came at Horizon's annual gala, a glittering affair in a Manhattan ballroom. Amara stood at the podium, her black gown shimmering under the chandeliers, her voice steady as she addressed the crowd. Employees, investors, and media filled the room, their eyes on her. She spoke of Horizon's future, of innovation and unity, her words weaving a vision that felt alive. The crowd was with her, their applause warm and genuine. Then Caldwell stood, glass in hand, his voice cutting through the room. "A toast," he said, his smile cold, "to new beginnings, and to those who think they can replace a legacy." The room went silent, the air heavy with his challenge. Amara didn't flinch. She raised her glass, her eyes locked on his. "To legacies," she said, her voice clear and strong, "and to building new ones better than before." The crowd erupted, drowning out Caldwell's smirk. He sat, defeated, but Amara knew he wasn't finished. Later, as she mingled, Tom approached, his face flushed with nerves. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice low. "Caldwell's been meeting with shareholders, pushing for a vote to oust you." Amara's heart sank, but she nodded. "Thank you, Tom." The twist stung. This wasn't just personal. It was a coup. She spent the night working, calling allies, preparing for the fight. By morning, she had a plan. At the shareholder meeting, Caldwell took the stage, his speech polished but venomous. He painted Amara as a liability, her leadership a risk. The room was divided, tension thick. Then Amara stood. She didn't attack. She didn't need to. She presented her results. New patents, rising profits, a culture reborn. She spoke of the interns she'd met, of the employees who felt seen for the first time. "This is Horizon's future," she said, not a man clinging to the past. The vote was unanimous. Caldwell was out. He left the room, his shoulders slumped, his empire gone. Amara stood tall, but the victory was bittersweet. She'd fought not just for herself, but for everyone who'd been underestimated. The weight of it settled into her bones, a reminder of the work still ahead. The fallout was swift. Caldwell's consulting contract was terminated, his allies quietly distanced themselves, and the media turned on him, digging up stories of his toxic leadership. Horizon, under Amara's guidance, began to soar. New products launched, stock prices climbed, and the company's culture shifted, becoming a place where ideas thrived. But Amara didn't rest. She knew success was fragile, and she carried the weight of those who looked to her as proof that they, too, could rise. Late one night, she sat in her office, the city quiet below. A knock at the door startled her. It was Lila, the flight attendant from that first night, now an intern at Horizon. "I just wanted to say thank you," Lila said, her voice soft, "for showing me what's possible." Amara smiled, her heart full. "You're the one making it possible," she said. "Keep going." Lila nodded, tears in her eyes, and left. Amara turned back to her work, but the moment lingered. She thought of her younger self, the girl who'd fought through doubt and dismissal to stand here now. She thought of the intern in the elevator, of Tom's quiet courage, of Lila's gratitude. This was why she fought, not just for the title, but for the ripple effect, the lives changed by her refusal to back down. The next day, she announced a new initiative, a mentorship program for underrepresented youth, funded by Horizon. The press called it groundbreaking, but to Amara, it was personal. It was her promise to the world that no one would be left behind. Months later, at a company-wide meeting, she stood before her team, her voice steady but warm. "We're not just building technology," she said. "We're building futures, together." The applause was deafening, but Amara's eyes were on the faces in the crowd. Engineers, interns, dreamers. She saw herself in them, and she knew the fight was worth it. Amara stood at the edge of Horizon's new campus, a sleek complex designed to inspire. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was packed. Employees, media, community leaders, all gathered to celebrate. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the glass buildings, a symbol of the future Amara had built. She thought back to that flight, to Caldwell's words, to the weight of every door slammed in her face. She'd turned those moments into fuel, into this. As she cut the ribbon, the crowd cheered, but her eyes found the intern from the elevator, now a full-time engineer, standing proud. She saw Lila, clipboard in hand, organizing the event with quiet confidence. She saw Tom, no longer afraid, leading a team of his own. This was her legacy, not just a company, but a movement. Later, alone in her office, she opened a letter from Elaine. "You did it, kid, and you're just getting started." Amara smiled, tucking the letter away. She looked out at the city, its lights a constellation of possibilities. The fight wasn't over. There would always be more Caldwells, more doubts, more battles. But she was ready. She'd always been ready. The world was watching, and she would show them what was possible. End.